least taught aspects of knife fighting, in my opinion, is how to use the point. In this videotape series, we're going to go over all the basic ways to use the point. The first one I want to talk about is how to rake with the tip. You can use your knife to wound to degree. And one of the best ways to do that with your tip is to rake somebody with it. What you want to do when you rake somebody is you want to limit the depth of penetration that your tip goes into their flesh. I want to call Felix out to assist me for a second, and I want to show you how to rake with the tip of your knife. The main thing you want to remember when you rake with the tip of the knife is you want to keep the point at right angles to the direction that you're going to rake. If I'm going to rake Felix across his chest, I'm not going to put the edge in the same direction I'm going to pull. That will drive the tip in deeper than what I want. I don't want a deep wound, I want a shallow wound. I want to tear the skin, tear the flesh, and limit the depth of the penetration of that wound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my edges so they're at right angles to the direction I'm going to pull, and I'm going to rake that tip across his pec. Now I'm using a trainer here where we've taken the edge and the point off, but it still doesn't feel that friendly, does it, Felix? As I rake across his pec on both sides, this is a good target here. You can rip the flesh when you rake it, rip the skin, but you won't go through the rib cage if you keep the edges parallel to the direction you're going. So you might bounce across those ribs as you go across, but you open that up and cause a lot of pain and blood, and you'll scare him. So you can come in here, rake somebody, come back out, and he has something to think about. So you can wound to degree. Another good target for raking is across the shoulder blades in the back. You can come across here on the shoulder blade and rake from the back like this and open up their back, cause pain, cause blood, and wound to degree without severely traumatizing them in the future. You can also rake across the outside of the arm or the outside of the leg. Now you say, where in the world are you going to use raking? Why do you need to wound to degree like this? Well, sometimes you want to drive people back. You could be in a crowd and you want to move that crowd back. Maybe a crowd has somebody down and they're pummeling him, punching him, kicking him. And if you allow that to continue for very long, that crowd will beat that person to death. But you don't want to go into that crowd and stab every single person in that crowd. What you want to do is to assist what they're doing and to move back. You want to drive them off. This is where raking is appropriate, because I can come in here and rake Felix. Even if he put his hand up, I can rake across his hand. He gets some, this person gets some, I rake this person, I rake that person. I can drive that crowd back with my knife. Now, about a year ago, it might even been two, there was an incident in New York City on, I think it was Puerto Rican Independence Day, where they had this big parade. And after the parade, a lot of young men went on what they call a wilding, where they started sexually assaulting young women in huge groups. There might have been 50 to 100, 200 men assaulting these young women. It was outrageous, it was indecent, it was immoral, it was dead wrong. No one came to these women's aid. I like to think, maybe I wouldn't have the courage to do this, but I like to think I'd have the courage if I was there to pull out my Vaquero Grande, which I always carry with a 6-inch blade, and rake that crowd. Here's an appropriate response. You can rake this person, move to the next person, the next person, the next person, the next person. Let's say this person grabs you. Now, you can't afford in this to be tied up. He's going to try to take me to the ground. I might quit raking him at this point and cut it to make him let go. So you can go up with your response exponentially as appropriate. You can rake, then you can go to cutting, then you can go to stabbing, and go up the force continuum as appropriate. Okay? But raking gives you some options that you need to be aware of. I would stay away from raking the face because you're going to cause scarring on the face that's permanent. If I take this knife, yes, I probably won't kill him, but raking across the face, I'm going to ruin his looks forever. He's not going to be the same. So I would use this thing very judiciously again, but I would use it across the pecs, on the outside of the arm, not the inside, because we want to limit the damage, and across the shoulder blades. On the outside of the thighs, okay? Even on the outside of the calf, you could rake. And you're gonna limit the depth of the penetration of the wound. But raking is a viable way to use the point that you should have in your arsenal so that you don't always have to respond with lethal force. You can in here and ask him to bring his trainer. And I'm going to show you one of the ways that you can practice with your training partner as you're just starting out. What I want you to do, let's come this way so everyone can see. The safest way to do this, and we always want to avoid, whenever we're training with our partner, we want to avoid anything that comes near his eye. So we're going to ask him to extend his arm and hold out his trainer. And what I want you to do, let's back up just a tad. Okay? I want you to look at his red stabbing tip and jab it with your knife. Just nice and easy, like that. As you get a little bit more comfortable, move around and jab that tip. Real nice and easy. Just jab that like that. What you're trying to do is build some eye-hand coordination and get used to that motion so that you don't decrease your speed by trying to add power. Leave power out of this. Your knife will do the work. If you've got a fighting knife, like a Thai pan that we showed you earlier what this knife can do, when you jab something with the tip of this knife like that in the fingers, his finger's going to fall off. Maybe 2 fingers will fall off. It doesn't take much when you have a well-designed and well-built fighting knife that's razor sharp. That little jabbing motion will penetrate that arm, penetrate that shoulder, penetrate that wrist. Doesn't take much. So you don't want to trade speed for power. You want speed with the jabbing motion. That's all you're looking for. Speed and back out. That's one way to train it. The other one is when you're actually doing sparring, which we'll get to later. As we begin to add power to our thrusting motion, we leave jabbing behind and we go into what I call the straight thrust. All the straight thrust is your initial jabbing motion with more power. When you execute a straight thrust, now you start to use power from your shoulder as well as your arm in this thrusting or stabbing motion. So now you're just using your shoulder to stab with. And you're coming out like this. I go slow, extend my arm with power, and I bend in my knee just a little bit here. Just a little bit. That's a straight thrust. This is a jab, just with your arm, and a straight thrust has more power. Now, our goal with the jab was only to get the tip to penetrate. Half inch, inch, we were happy with that. With a straight thrust, we're trying to get most of the blade into our insertion. You should be able to get 4, 5, 6, or maybe even 7 inches of blade, depending on what you hit. A straight thrust should have enough power that if it doesn't hit a bone, let's say you hit the abdomen below the rib cage, you should get full penetration. Any soft spot on the body, you should get full penetration with a straight thrust. If you turn the blade so it's parallel to the rib cage like this, if it doesn't hit the rib bone, in all likelihood, it definitely will go straight through. You'll get full penetration with a straight thrust. And even sometimes you'll split the rib because the rib, as you saw in some of our cutting tests, isn't that darn tough. But if you don't have a lot of power, sometimes it'll bounce off. It won't, in my experience, it won't penetrate the sternum. The bone here is too hard and too thick. It's not going to go through here. It won't go through the ball joints of your shoulders. It won't go through your shoulder blades. It won't go through your hips. So it has limited penetration, but more than with the jabbing thrust. Again, the motion is mostly from your shoulder and arm. It comes straight, like that. A little bit in the knee as you go forward to add a little power. But again, it's not a fully committed stabbing motion. I'm going to have to do this, come back in here. And again, we're going to train this, step back. We're going to train this just like we did with the jab. You're going to have your training partner, as you start out as a beginner, extend his trainer. You're going to look for his tip. Before I had you jab the tip. Now I want you to stab it a little hard with your straight thrust. A little harder. Like that. Practice that, switch back and forth until you can start building that eye-hand coordination and that familiarity with that motion. Going up in our continuum of force, I want to show show you how to do a power stab with your knife. A power stab is a full commitment of your body. When you use a power stab, you're looking to impale the full length of your blade through your opponent. Rib cage or not, you're going all the way through. And the best way to do this from our fighting stance is push off with our back foot slightly. Take a step, bend that knee, and stab. So you're going to get power from your legs, your body motion, your weight being transferred, your shoulder, your back, your hip, everything's going to come together in a powerful stab like that. It's not as long as a full lunge, but there is some forward motion in a power stab. You're going to harness all of your strength into that motion. Now with a power stab, like I said, you'll go right through the rib cage if you have a properly designed fighting knife. I don't care if your blade's parallel or at right angles to the rib cage. It should split the rib and keep going right through the chest cavity. It's my experience that a good power stab will go through the shoulder blades, possibly through the hips. Again, it will not go through the sockets of the hips or the sockets of the shoulder. It may or may not penetrate the sternum. But most of the other body parts are vulnerable to a power stab. You're going to train the power stab like we did the two other thrusts. And after you just come back in, extend this trainer. Let's step back a little bit, Felix. And you're going to come on guard and you're going to power stab. Your object is to drive that point right through your opponent. So you look at that arc mark and you stab. Hard. And you want to go right through it with intensity. You're going to drive your point right through your opponent. Up to now, I've taught you how to use your point in straight stabbing motions. We had the jab, we had the straight thrust, we had the power thrust. But I don't want you to think that you just use your tip in straight motions. Nothing could be further than the truth in a knife fight. The better that you can use your tip in arcing or looping or circular hooking motions, the better. You want to learn how to hook with the tip. You want to learn how to arc with the tip, and you want to make big looping motions with your tip. All those things are going to help you. So I'm going to go in and show you how you do that. The first thing I like to do is I want to show you how your tip can arc up. And this is going to be important later as we get into cutting and thrusting and defenses and offense and stuff. You're going to come back and remember as we're showing you different angles of attack that you can use all these different angles with these different motions. So your tip can arc up like this. You come this way so you can see. You can arc up this way. You can arc down. You can arc in diagonally from either side. You can hook this way or this way. And this is really important. I'm going to get back to that. You can throw looping attacks this way or this way. You can throw looping attacks up from either side. It's really important that you get really good control over your tip. You can make short arcs with your blade. This comes from épée fencing, where we just turn our wrist. I'm going to have Felix come in here now, and I'm going to have him take this trainer, come on guard, and I'm going to show different ways that I'm going to use arcing, looping, and hooking motions on him. And I'm going to show the upward arcing motion. A lot of times, I'll attack opponent's knife hand from below, an upward arcing motion. Here's what happens. Felix can't even see this because his hand is in the way. If I line my blade up with this hand from here and arc up like this, and if you miss with your first strike, always follow it with the second and you'll usually hit it. If I arc up, he can't even see that blade rising because his own hand covers the target, the incoming blade. His own hand covers it. He can't see it. So this is the bottom of the hand is particularly vulnerable to an upward arcing stab. The other way that I'll use arcing or hooking motions is I'll attack the back of his hand like this. All I'll do from here is turn my wrist and drive the tip into the back of his hand and break those metacarpals and cut those fingers. So I'll go really slow so you can see how to do this. See this? I just turn my wrist and drive my point in. Just like that. So I may move here and just turn like that. And hit him with the tip and drive it right through, break those metacarpals. Let's turn on this side, because I think you'll be able to see better. When I arc on this side, I'm trying to cut these fingers off or cut his thumb off. So I'll be here and I'll arc like this, just like that. And I'll take those fingers. I'll come over and take his thumb. I may take his wrist, coming over here. I may take his bicep. That's pretty deep in committed motion. I'm going a long ways past his knife. What I really want you to do is get good at arcing your blade this way. Taking those fingers, taking that thumb. So we show him arcing up and to the side. You can arc diagonally down also. At the hand, coming down on the thumb from both sides, from the front and also from the back. If you get past this blade, you can arc down, getting past the clavicle here, going down to the subclavian artery on both sides. You want to get in through here. You can go through into the chest in a downward motion on both sides. You can drop and go into his abdomen, and you can arc down and stick it into his thigh. All of these different motions are confusing to your opponent. When you're arcing here one time, and the next time you arc here and stick it right into his thigh. So I come here, and I come here. Those are some of the arcing motions. Let's go into hooking motions. I'm going to go really slow here because we don't have a fencing mask on to protect Felix, but we all have peripheral vision. And our peripheral vision stops right about here. It's about the end of what I can see to the side. At home, I want you to try this. I want you to put your hand here in front of your face and move it out to the side, the side, the side, the side, the side, that you can't see it anymore. That's what you're going to do when you use a hooking motion with your fighting knife. What you want to do quite often is come here and hook your blade in and strike your opponent in the temple with the point. Hook it in here, hook it into his neck. Let's turn so they can see a little bit better. Hook it in here, hook it into his neck, hook it into his abdomen, hook it into his elbow, hook it into his shoulder. Because for a split second, that leaves his vision and goes outside of it and enters again. So the hooking motion can be very deceptive, and you should have that in your bag of tricks when you use your point. So you have arcing, upward, downward, diagonal, every direction, and hooking in every direction, and looping also. You can loop your blade. You can be here in an overhead posture and loop your blade in and stab down. So there's lots and lots of ways you can use your point, and you need to experiment with arcing, hooking, and looping. Be safe. Most people don't realize that you can use your fighting knife just like a fencer uses his épée, and you can get a beautiful fencing style thrust off a fighting knife. And the thing I like about it is it's so quick. I'm going to use this trainer to illustrate it. With a fencing style thrust, just put your hands down for this. All you do from your fighting position or on guard stance is reach out and touch your opponent. Lots of times you just bring your knife up. From wherever it is, you bring it up and touch your target. As you touch your target, you're going to bend your front leg and shoot your weight forward, just like that. So you touch and push. You just touch them and push. So what happens is, as you touch them with the tip of your razor sharp fighting knife, as you touch them, as you practice this, the transfer of your weight is almost instantaneous or simultaneous. As soon as you touch them, you transfer your weight. And it shoots the blade right through the target. Puts all your body weight behind that point. It's extremely fast and deceptive thing to do because all you can do is you can touch somebody on the earlobes. You can touch them on the nose. You can touch them on the lips. I can touch them on the thumb or that thumb or on his ring. I can touch him on that mole on his neck. I can pick off his eyebrow. All I have to do is decide where I want to touch him and push. So I'm going to go real slow, so you need to practice this, and we're going to show how to practice it. You touch your opponent, you touch your opponent, you touch your opponent. Now, as you touch him, you bend your front knee, and you extend. See how I extended my hips and my body weight behind the point? Just like that. I touch him, and I push. I touch him, I touch him, I touch him, and I push. It's not very comfortable to do this, so you don't want to prolong it. Here's how you get started with your opponent. Have him put his trainer out to the side. Touch it, touch it, touch it, push. Touch it, touch it, touch it, push. Touch it and push. Touch it, touch it, touch it and push. Touch it and push. Touch it and push. Touch it and push. So you go back from touching, just with your tip, and then transferring your weight so that you get really, really clever at putting your tip on whatever part of your opponent's anatomy you want. You can, without any thought, pick off fingers that you want to touch. I want to hit his little finger, I just touch him with my tip and push and knock it right off. That's how good you can get with this fencing style thrust. It takes some practice. To really get how to use it, you probably need to go to your opponent's chest too. And I want you to be super careful here. You really should put your fencing mask on when you do this, just to be double safe, so that you don't slide up and hit him in the face. There isn't anything that we're ever going to do that's worth harming our eyesight. We went over that before. So you can touch him on the chest, touch him on the chest, touch him, and push. And you can see the power as I just barely did that and rocked Felix backwards. This is another very useful thrusting technique to have in your arsenal. Earlier, when I was discussing the various ways to grip your fighting knife, we touched briefly on the reverse grip. I want to show how you use the reverse grip and thrusting. As we mentioned before, the reverse grip allows you to stab with a locked wrist. This means you can deliver a lot of power. This is the long suit of a reverse grip. I'm going to put this trainer down in favor of a little softer one, and I'm going to show you how you can use it to stab. The best way to deliver power to finish an opponent is with the reverse grip. There's no other stabbing method outside of perhaps a push dagger that allows you to penetrate as much as the body. When you're using the reverse grip and you're using your technique correctly, you can cut right through the rib cage. You can power through the sternum. You can go through the shoulder blades on either side of the body. The rib cage, some of the bones in the legs and the arms. The only thing that I found that will stop a reverse grip is the balls of the shoulder and the balls of the hip. Everything else, you've got enough power. You can penetrate the pelvic bone. Everything else you can go through. You can penetrate the skull with the reverse grip. It's an extremely powerful way to deliver a blow. I like to do it with my left leg forward if I can, because I can get more power. You can drive down with it. You can come in here, let's turn around so the camera can see. I can come to the side, this way, or diagonally down, or diagonally into the neck. You can do it, of course, off your forward leg, but you don't have quite as much power. You can do it in a backhand motion this way. You can come upward with it. You can come backward, backward down. So you can get a lot of power. You can use your other hand to reinforce it. So it gives a lot of power, but it doesn't have much range, as we mentioned. It has to be used judiciously. One of the best ways to use the reverse grip is if you cut your opponent's knife out of his hand, you cut him, you control him, you switch your grip, and now I can finish him. Drive it right through his shoulder blade like that. That'll go right through with a reverse grip. That's the long suit of it. This is extreme power. But you want to use it at the appropriate time in the fight. It's not what you start out with, it's what you finish the fight with. As I mentioned earlier, no one holds still when you're attacking them with a knife. They're always in motion, and all the thrusting techniques that we've shown so far are useless unless you develop your eye-hand coordination. I'm going to call Felix out here and show what I mean. Your goal quite often when you're fighting with a knife is you want to cut or stab his hand so he drops his knife. But you've got to be able to direct your point with enough accuracy that you can hit this hand in motion. Felix is just going to move his hand around a little bit, and I'm going to pick it off with my tip. Move a little faster, Felix. Give me some evasive motions. There I got his hand here. There I got it again. There I took his wrist. There I took his wrist. There I took his palm over the top, from the side. There I got it again. There I dropped on top. I stabbed it back. See what I mean? You've got to get used to intercepting a hand in motion with your point. The way you do that is you build your eye-hand coordination so that when you see someone, number one, coming in, you can stop them with your tip on their bicep even. You can stop them
on cutting their thumb, like this, where I just stabbed him in the thumb. That backhand, I can stab him by taking off his elbow. You see where I just scraped his arm here? And then in a Thai pan, I laid his whole arm wide open. So it's really important you learn to control your tip. Now I'm going to show you how you use wiffle balls built in a little frame to build your eye-hand coordination. I like the beginners to start with their trainer because it gives you a bigger surface area to stab with. So I like to hang wiffle balls. You can hang these from your garage door. You can make a frame. We've got some that are about 1.25 inches